Hi, everyone, and welcome to SHRM Study Sessions, the podcast where we talk all things HR, professional growth, and of course, SHRM certifications. My guest today is Alex, a seasoned professional with over 15 years of experience in the corporate world, who has recently decided to pursue a career in HR. Alex is starting his SHRM-CP certification journey and is here to share his story, including what inspired his pivot, the challenges he's faced, and his plans for tackling the certification process. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks so much for having me, Shirley. I'm really excited to be here and share my story.
We're thrilled to have you. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about your professional background and what inspired your transition into HR?
Sure. My background is in operations management. I've spent the past 15 years in roles where I was responsible for streamlining processes, managing teams, and driving efficiency. While I enjoyed that work, I always found myself gravitating toward the people side of things, helping team members grow, resolving conflicts, and fostering collaboration. Over time, I realized that what I loved most about my job wasn't the operations, it was the human element. I started thinking, why not make that my full-time focus? That's when I began exploring HR as a career path.
That's such a relatable story. A lot of people fall into HR because they're naturally drawn to helping people and improving workplace dynamics. What made you decide to pursue this SHRM-CP certification as part of your transition?
For me, it was about credibility and structure. Coming from outside the HR field, I wanted to make sure I understood the foundational principles and best practices. The SHRM-CP certification seemed like the perfect way to build that knowledge and show potential employers that I'm serious about this career pivot.
That's such a smart move. So, where are you in your SHRM-CP journey right now?
I'm in the early stages. I officially registered for the exam about a month ago, and I'm just getting started with the SHRM learning system. Right now, I'm focused on building a study schedule and figuring out how to balance studying with my current job.
Speaking of balance, transitioning careers while working full-time is no small feat. How are you managing your time and energy?
It's definitely a challenge. I've set aside about 2 hours every evening for studying, and I use my weekends to dive deeper into the material. One thing that's helped is treating my study time like an appointment. It's non-negotiable. I've also been really intentional about taking breaks and not overloading myself. It's easy to feel like you have to do everything at once, but I've learned that consistency is more important than cramming.
That's great advice. Let's talk about the content you're studying. Has anything surprised you so far about the SHRM-Basque?
Definitely. One thing that stood out is how much HR encompasses. It's not just hiring and firing, like some people think. There's workforce planning, employee engagement, risk management, compliance, and so much more. I've also been surprised by how much of my previous experience in operations applies to HR. For example, when I studied change management, I realized I'd already been doing a lot of that in my past roles. It's been reassuring to see how transferable my skills are.
That's such an important realization. HR really is a broad and dynamic field. Let's talk about the challenges. What's been the toughest part of this transition so far?
Honestly, it's been the feeling of starting over. After 15 years in a field where I felt confident and experienced, it's humbling to step into something new. There's also a bit of imposter syndrome, wondering if I belong in this space or if I'm making the right decision. But every time I doubt myself, I remind myself why I'm doing this. I believe in the power of HR to make workplaces better, and that keeps me motivated.
That's such a powerful mindset. What's been the most rewarding part of this journey so far?
The learning process has been incredibly rewarding. It's exciting to dive into a new field and discover how much there is to learn. I've also loved connecting with other HR professionals through networking events, online communities, and now this podcast. It's been amazing to see how supportive and welcoming the HR community is.
That's one of my favorite things about HR too, the sense of community. Speaking of connections, are you working with a mentor or study group as you prepare for the SHRM-CP?
Yes, I joined a local SHRM chapter, and through that, I found a mentor who's been in HR for over 20 years. They've been an incredible resource for understanding the practical side of HR and how to approach the exam. I'm also part of an online study group. We meet virtually once a week to go over practice questions and share study tips. It's been great to learn from others and have that accountability. They've been big advocates for Exam Edge, and my peers were able to show me what a great tool and resource it is. I'm planning on sitting for my first attempt during this testing period, so getting as much exposure to the questions as I can is really one of my big ways of studying and prepping for the exam.
That's fantastic. A support system makes such a difference. Before we wrap up, what advice would you give to other experienced professionals who are considering a pivot into HR?
My biggest piece of advice is to lean into your transferable skills. Even if you don't have direct HR experience, you probably have skills that align with the field, whether it's communication, problem solving, or leadership. Also, don't be afraid to start at the beginning. It can be intimidating to go back to being a beginner, but it's also an opportunity to grow and challenge yourself. Finally, surround yourself with people who believe in you. Whether it's a mentor, a study group, or supportive friends and family, having that encouragement makes all the difference.
That's such valuable advice, Alex. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I know your story will inspire so many of our listeners who are considering a similar path.
Thank you, Shirley. I'm so glad I could share, and I hope my story helps others feel confident in pursuing their own HR dreams.
To all our listeners, if you're thinking about a career pivot or starting your HR journey, remember that it's never too late to pursue your passion. The road might be challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. That's all for today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself. Thanks for tuning in.